Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register with our second Tuesday Game Week podcast for Hawk Central of the season. Hawkeyes are 1-0, Tyler Tachman, but now the stakes get a lot higher. This is your first Cy-Hawk game, Iowa State, Saturday, 2:30 p.m. on Fox. A lot to get to this afternoon. We had our press conferences earlier today here in Iowa City. Let's talk about Cade McNamara first, Tyler. He came to the podium a little later in the day, had a full, I guess, wrap or whatever leg sleeve on, I guess we'll call it, on his right leg. Not that that's a surprise. It just seems like, Tyler, that this is going to be, based on the words of Kirk Ferentz and Cade McNamara, pretty much a season-long injury management situation.
Yeah, and I think, the point that you've kind of brought up is how concerning is it from a standpoint of him being able to scramble and kind of move in the pocket. And to me right now, I'm not really too concerned about that because Iowa's offensive line did a great job, I think, in pass blocking against Utah State. And obviously things will probably get more difficult as, you start playing Big Ten competition. And certainly I think Saturday will be a much bigger test for the offensive line. But if the offensive line can do a really good job of protecting Cade and, limit the vulnerable situations or potential scrambling situations that he'll be in, that doesn't – I'm not too concerned about because it's not like Cade's a dual threat guy. That's, he's no Lamar Jackson. That's going to, you're relying on the, a read option or anything. I think it's more just of can he use his legs if he's forced to. And so that's why I'm not as concerned about it. I'm more concerned about, one, can the offensive line keep the clean pocket and protect him so he doesn't have to be trying to run around every play. And number two is, can the offensive line create more holes for Caleb Johnson and LaShawn Williams and Jazz Patterson? To me, before you look at kind of Cade's ability to scramble and stuff, I think, can the O-line protect him and can they open holes for the running backs? To me, those two are more important.
Yeah, I disagree completely. I mean, if he's a sitting duck in the pocket, it's going to be something the Iowa State defense can, they don't have to account for his scrambling. They don't have to spy him with a linebacker. I mean, you're basically adding a defender to Iowa State's defense by not having to worry about him running, and it's already a really good defense. I mean, they can rush more guys. A lot of times we've seen Iowa State, with their 3-3-5, rush just three guys, and now why not rush more? Because you don't have to worry about you want to get to Cade McNamara. You want to knock him out of the game. He's so important to Iowa that they want to have him in there despite being limited in mobility. And he now cannot run a quarterback sneak. Now, Kirk Ferentz says that's off the menu. Do we believe him? Do we believe that Cade McNamara, it is impossible for him to run a quarterback sneak? I mean, I kind of, based on the evidence we saw the other day, Tyler, 4th and 1, they handed it off. In the past, that would have been a Spencer Petras automatic sneak, either behind Tyler Linderbaum or even Logan Jones, both guys that can squat an enormous amount of weight. So you run behind those centers. So I know it sounds silly, but just having the QB sneak even off the table is that's not good. That's not good. They're going to have to find other ways to convert those short yardage situations. And I mean, frankly, they were 0 for 1 the other day.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point about the ability to QB sneak it, but I'm not sure if even if Cade was 100% healthy, like I don't think defenses would probably have to put a spy on him. Because I'm just pulling up his rushing yardage from the 2021 season, in which he, Michigan won the Big Ten title, went to a college football playoff in the regular season, and I'm guessing this is taking into account his sack yardage. So, he rushed for 27 yards. So, I don't think that it's necessarily like a huge deal because I don't think you would have had to have put a spy on him or really worried about it. I think it's more of a kind of a Houdini act that if he were to get in trouble and there were to be pressure, is he going to be able to kind of maneuver his way out of it? It's not as much of a taking a really strong element away from his game, because I think that the strong element is in his game is to be able to sit back there and make good decisions, make poised decisions, make good throws downfield. And I don't think the leg is really affecting that at all. So to me, it's more just, maybe in the 3 to 5 times a game that he is able to kind of improvise, or roll out, or do those types of things. How much is that going to have an impact on the game? Like I said, I think it will, and I think it's something to monitor. But I think in terms of priority, I'd put above that what the offensive line is doing from a pass protection and run blocking standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, another thing Kirk Ferentz said today, and again, let's, do we believe him or not? He said they're not running bootlegs with Cade McNamara. I mean, that's a staple bread and butter play in Iowa's zone scheme, where they, fake the outside zone to the left or whatever, and then roll out to the right. We see that probably 3 or 4 times a game. That's also not in the playbook right now, according to Ferentz. Now, he could be playing rope a dope with Matt Campbell and John Heacock in Iowa State over there. Who knows? I mean, maybe they're playing some games here in the media, but based on what it sounded like to me, Cade McNamara is not planning on running much. He's just trying to get to game day for the most part. And that's probably where we should at least focus part of this conversation, is it just seems like, what we heard from Cade today is that, he's just trying to get to the game at this point. I mean, I think I asked him if he could scramble. He's like, I'm just trying to get as ready as I can for Saturday, basically. And, someone else asked him, like, what did they say? Like, does your leg feel better now than it did this Tuesday than it did feel last Tuesday? And he's like, he's kind of hemming and hawing about it. He didn't say yes, so he basically said he's really sore, which it seems like, my guess is, just reading on that, again, you have to take this at face value or not, just depending on what you want to believe, but that he is probably doing worse this week than he was last week. So again, ongoing concern, probably not going to be making plays in the pocket, like I said, and probably taking more sacks than he needs to. So all in all, not great for the Iowa offense. But at the same time, Tyler, I would say maybe they want Iowa State to try to come after him, and because he is good at making reads and good at making decisions, and maybe Iowa can do better if there's fewer guys in coverage for Iowa State if they're coming after Cade. I don't know. It's going to be a really interesting watch on Saturday.
Yeah, a few things about that. One, I think he said that he was, the leg on Sunday was sore, but he said so was the rest of his body, because it's obviously playing in a physical game. And as far as the bootlegs, I can remember at least one they ran. I don't know if it's different week 2 than it was week 1, but I can remember at least one kind of rollout that he hit someone on. I think it was, it may have been Nico Ragaini, but I remember that being, kind of in the fold last week. So I don't know if that's a new development of them kind of taking that out, but
well, that was before he got hurt again, though. That was before he retweets it. He did that in the first quarter, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then I would also say from the, if they are going to bring more pressure, I think you can. I think something that Iowa did well is running those kind of screens against Utah State, and I think that's one way that you can counter that pressure, because that one to Jazz Patterson on a 3rd and long, they dumped it off to him, and he got a first down. And honestly, it probably could have been a touchdown, because Iowa had basically 2 blockers on one and whiffed on both of them. So that was the only reason it wasn't a touchdown. But I think that now that Iowa has more playmakers than it did last season, I think they have more ways to counter what the defense is doing. And because we saw like Jazz Patterson get involved, Caden Whitgen on those kind of jet sweeps, and it didn't work. I think he did it a few times. It didn't work every time, but he did get some chunk yardage on it. So I think that because of, you have a healthy Deontay Vines, Nico Ragaini, now you bring in Eric All and Caleb Brown and Seth Anderson, it feels like you kind of have more ways to counter what defenses could potentially throw at you than Iowa did last season. So I think, even if they do dial up pressure or such things like that, Iowa has the playmakers in place to kind of to counter it.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm very fascinated to see kind of how this offense evolves. I mean, maybe the Cade McNamara thing forces some creativity, or maybe it buries Brian Ferentz into even a further bunker of just drop back throw. Hopefully for Iowa's sake, it gets them to think outside the box a little bit. Try to come up with different ways to get Cade McNamara like outside the pocket somehow. Whether that's, and I asked him this too, Tyler, and I he didn't really answer me, but I feel like the answer is yes. I said, do you feel like in shotgun is going to be better for you than under center because you don't have to retreat, squat down under there to get the ball? You're just standing back there taking the snap, and it seemed like to me he was more comfortable in those shotgun situations, but he said no. So, or he said it didn't matter. He said I'll do whatever Brian says, basically. But I feel like it seems like more shotgun would be smart. But I guess that's another little piece of drama. We'll find out on Saturday. Let's go to our second topic, Tyler. Kind of other things we learned today, and I want to start with you because you're writing about the offensive line. That was the number one request for my DVR Monday recap, and that was the main topic of that. But it seemed like the Utah State game was a mixed bag. The pass protection, as I reviewed the game, and I think that this was a commonly held theme today too, talking to players, is the pass protection was very, very, very good compared to last year, like not even close. I mean, I talked to Jennings Dunker for a little while. I know you did too. He was like, the pass pro was embarrassing to watch a year ago against South Dakota State, and it was, he thought it was pretty good this week against Utah State. Run blocking, totally opposite story. So, what did you learn from your interviews today? Because again, if Iowa can run the ball against Iowa State, huge if, but if it can run the ball, I mean, that solves a lot of the Cade McNamara troubles. So, your thoughts on what you heard about the offensive line today?
I think that, I mean, maybe among the keys to how far Iowa goes this season is reliant on Cade McNamara's production, and I think that means it's reliant on Cade McNamara's ability to stay healthy, and I think that means that it's reliant on the offensive line. So I think that that tracks back to all of how productive the offensive line can be. I think really it might be the most important thing to Iowa's season. I'm kind of hesitant to say the most, and it might be the most, but I think it's definitely up there if it's not the most. I think, and like you said, it was very clear that the pass protection was really good. Cade McNamara was only sacked once. It felt like a lot of times he was able to go through his reads. He had enough time back there in the pocket, and when you talk about him being hampered with the injury, being able to keep that clean pocket and limit the times that he's going to have to use his legs is really important. And not only him being able to make plays through the air, but also just keeping him on the field in general. And in the run blocking side of it, I think in Kirk Ferentz, this is what he said. He said that so Utah State had a new defensive coordinator. There was just a lot of uncertainty of what exactly they were going to throw at Iowa from a scheme standpoint, and Kirk Ferentz said that affected basically what I was able to do on the ground game. I think to a certain extent that's fair. I also think it's week one, so don't put all the stock into it. But at the same time, Iowa's front should be able to handle Utah State regardless of what they're throwing at them. I think a non-Power 5 team, even if they're throwing the most exotic stuff at Iowa, if they want to be the power team that they say they want to be, I think you need to be able to handle Utah State. So I think, on the ground. So I think that was a little bit of a concern. And the growth now, I think the biggest question is not where they start, but where they're going to progress from here on out. So a lot of it was, Jennings Dunker was saying, and the margin for error is not big. Like Jennings Dunker was saying, like, it's the first step. It's the angle you take to block. It's not like, these are, wholesale things that can make a difference. It's little kind of minute details that can make the difference between opening up a hole and not, and allowing penetration and not. So I think it's, from week 1 to week 2, it's going to be interesting to see the growth. And then, if we're having the same conversation mid-season of, they're not, they're the same at the same place, or they're worse, then I think that's obviously a real concern, because I think it's too much to ask, even with Cade McNamara, for Iowa to be like so reliant on the passing game, just because that's not how Iowa has been built. So
Right.
to be able to flip it that much from what Iowa traditionally has been, then to saying, we're going to almost abandon the run game, I think that's too much to ask from the passing game.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Iowa tries to abandon the run, even though it didn't look great the other day. Let's look at some stats from the Iowa State game. They gave up 106 rushing yards to UNI, but only 2.9 per carry. This is typically a team that has made it difficult for the Hawkeyes to run the football against. Frankly, been a really good defense against Iowa, as Kirk Ferentz said, basically the last, since 2018. I mean, that was a 10-3 game in 2018, 18-17 in 2019, 27-17 in 2021, but obviously a defensive touchdown in there for the Hawkeyes. And then, 10-7 last year. So, that's just Iowa's just had 5 offensive touchdowns the last 4 meetings against the Cyclones, and I think I'm doing that right in my head. That's pretty staggering. only an average of 1.25 touchdowns per game for the Hawkeyes offense. Got one from the defense in there, and a bunch of field goals. But still, it's good. Every yard's going to be really tough, and it will come down to good offensive line play. It did seem like there was some positive news. I don't know if he's going to play this week, but Bo Stevens, who started 10 games last year for the Hawkeyes at right guard, at guard. I think he flexed left and right from throughout the season, but he had remember that press conference we had the day that Ferentz said like Noah Shannon was out. He's like, we dodged a bullet on Saturday or whatever. It sounds like Bo Stevens was the guy they dodged the bullet on. They thought it was something serious. It ended up being a bruise, so he's been out 2 weeks. So he could be back into the offensive line rotation sooner rather than later. I don't know if we'll expect him this week, but that's a depth piece that gives you. That's probably why Tyler Ellsbury was in at right guard the other day, that Stevens has missed some time. So a little update there on your O-line. Let's flip it to the other side of the ball. I talked to, I know you did too, but Cooper DeJean I thought was pretty interesting. Talking about, what can you learn from Iowa State? They ran only 45 plays of offense, which is crazy. They talk about all this film that they want to see. Or they're so much better when they get opponent film, but they only had 45 plays. Some of those were J.J. Cole, some of them were Rocco Becht. So how much can you really learn? So Cooper said they've been studying a lot of past years, what's hurt them in past years against Iowa State. I'm super, super interested to see how this Iowa defense fares. I almost feel like, knowing the Cade McNamara injury situation, it's going to be an ongoing saga. But this defense has to have one of its Iowa defense type of games to be able to pull this one out on Saturday. I'm really excited to see how they handle the rookie quarterbacks for the Cyclones.
And I'm interested too to just see what, I think one of the issues that Iowa ran into against Utah State was because Utah State was so spread out, and you have Nick Jackson out there on the perimeter, and that creates mismatches when, a linebacker has to cover someone that's a lot quicker. I'm wondering if Iowa State looks at that and other teams down the road and sees that and goes a little bit more spread, or goes, with some schemes more spread out to put Iowa kind of in unfavorable positions. I think that looking back at the film from Utah State, it didn't feel like Iowa's defensive line had a great day in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback. But I think a lot of that was due to how quickly Utah State was getting the ball out. There were a ton of bubble screens, a ton of quick passes. So I don't feel like that was necessarily fully representative of what the defensive line is capable of. And maybe the Noah Shannon loss is more than we initially thought. Maybe Lucas Van Ness as well, losing him to the NFL. But I think it's still too early to tell, because, like I said, just the way that Utah State was playing made it really difficult for there to be enough time to get pressure on the quarterback. But I think that that the defensive line sets the tone for the rest of the defense because, right, if you get pressure on the quarterback, if you shut down the run, that's going to open up, Cooper DeJean for a chance to get a pick, Deshaun Lee, Xavier Wampa, who, by the way, that was a great interception that he had against Utah State. And I think on defense too, part of it is kind of just finishing those little plays because Iowa could have at least had 2 more takeaways against Utah State. There was that one that Jay Higgins could have picked off, one that was right in the hands of Cooper DeJean. Deshaun Lee had a pick, but it was taken away because of the penalty. It felt like that Utah State game could have been a 21-point-plus win for Iowa if they had a couple more of those things go their way. And in a game against Iowa State on the road in a tough environment, that might be those little plays might be the difference between a win and a loss rather than a 10-point and a 21-point win.
Yeah, great point. And one last Cooper DeJean item is before we move to our final topic is it was just kind of funny. Like I just asked him like, hey, were you at the stadium in 2021 in that top 10 showdown? He's like, no, I was in my dorm room watching the game. So he didn't make the travel roster 2 years ago at Iowa State and rooting for the team and watching it on TV basically. And now, 2 years later, he's the preseason All-American. It's just kind of crazy to think he's never played at Jack Trice. He's never been there as a player. He was and he was there as a fan, which is kind of interesting. In 2019, he grew up a Hawk fan over in Northwest Iowa, and stayed for that 6-hour rain delay. I asked him if he made it to the end. He said he did. He made it to the end of that game. Iowa won at 18-17. So Cooper DeJean ready to make his mark at Jack Trice on Saturday. And speaking of, let's move to our final topic, which was kind of hilarious. like to end last week we ended on the punter, and this week we end on rivalry game middle fingers. That was like it started with Torrey Taylor talking about 8-year-olds flipping them off while they entered the building, and then I want to say Luke Lachey said something about that. Then Joe Evans said something about that, and then Cade McNamara said something about that. We're like, what have you heard about the Iowa State rivalry? He's like, well, sounds like there's a lot of middle finger stories. So maybe it was like one kid doing it, but it's really exploded. And it's become kind of humorous that like all these kids like flipping off like that. The Hawk players as they come into Jack Trice Stadium. It's kind of funny. It just makes me laugh just how things get so blown out of proportion.
Well, and someone had asked Seth Anderson if he played in and then, an environment kind of like that. And he said that, so Charleston Southern played at ECU. And he said they had cans thrown at them. Like, I guess, I don't know if they were beer or soda, but crushed, they didn't have liquid in them. But he said that was a comparable, I guess, atmosphere. I don't,
Wow.
I don't, but anyhow.
Well, it just means more in the South, right?
But no, I think in kind of spinning this off of the atmosphere, that I feel like this is going to be the first real measuring stick to where Iowa is and how far they have to go if they want to make the Big Ten championship game, if they want to have a chance at winning that game. Going into a difficult atmosphere against your rival, I feel like this is going to be, the first real measuring stick and litmus test to where Iowa is. How are they going to be able to, handle all these elements? How much of a jump are they going to be able to make from week 1 to week 2? Because it felt like there was still a lot to be desired after week 1, and it felt like fixes that could be made, a lot of just little timing things. I think, the obvious next kind of test will be at Penn State, and I think that's one that you look at as being a game that will tell you very much if Iowa is legit at this point in the season or not, if they're able to compete or win that game. But I think before that, this is the type of game that if you want to, if I was going to be the team that it says it wants to be, this is a game that you need go in and need a win, and whether it's ugly or pretty, I think you need to go in there, do what needs to be done, and get out with a win. If they're able to do that, I think it's encouraging in terms of the trajectory of the season. If not, I think it kind of continues to drop more doubt into, how all this is coming together and where Iowa ultimately can end up this season.
Yeah, those are good points. I just kind of got a sense today, and they would never say this, but I just got a sense that maybe Iowa was, you know, I mean, even Kirk Ferentz pulled Cade McNamara last game with 8.5 minutes to go. He never would have done that uh, in a Big Ten game. Just feel like they were kind of pointing towards this week all along, trying to get to this week and get there as healthy as possible. Whereas I feel like Iowa State was reminded constantly how UNI is dangerous and has always played Iowa State close. And I feel like Iowa State really came into that opener, really focused and did a great job. And I feel like Iowa maybe just sort of, I don't know, kind of got by in week one. And I feel like I just sensed a really strong uh, amount of focus on this game and just the importance of this game. And just like you said, Tyler, I feel like they can come out and make a statement. And I feel like that's true, especially on defense. I almost feel like that last touchdown that Utah State got could be a real blessing in disguise long term. Just that, yeah, kind of put a little bit of a damper on the day to be 24-14, then not even be able to run out the clock and punt again, have the defense back on the field, put your starters back out there. What can they go finish the job this week? I think it's a great litmus test, as you said, because this is a game they should win. They're favored by 3.5, 4 points. I mean, not that they should win big, but they're favored to win. So go get the job done. You get next week against Western Michigan. That's the easiest, probably the easiest remaining game on the schedule, though Northwestern looked pretty awful the other day. But it gives you a little bit of a break if you can get this one. And I totally agree with you where any kind of like there was a lot of complaining after this last Utah State game, and I get it. I mean, you wanted it to look nicer, especially after the good start. But when I rewatched the game, I did not see enormous red flags. I saw a team that was improved from last year's week one, and the defense could have played a little better, but frankly, they were still in control the whole game. So a chance here for Iowa to kind of make a statement is what I'm saying. And any type of win, just take it this week because you get Western Michigan next week. Heck, maybe you can even rest Cade next week, potentially, and then be ready for Penn State. So, as you said, a huge game. Cade's talked big about where he wants to take this team, at least privately. So, and the guy's been in lots of rivalry games before. So, I still think that having Cade McNamara on your side is probably better than not right now.
No, and I agree. And I think as many questions as I have about, the offensive line and the run game, I think I saw a lot of encouraging things on Saturday. I think that they're capable of much more after rewatching the game. It felt like a lot of the timing was just a hair off, like on the offensive side of the ball, at least. And that's one where you have to understand that first off, Cade McNamara, that was his first game action in almost a year, that this is a offensive roster that has a lot of new pieces, that this is just game one. So I think the fact that I think their upside is far higher than last season without a doubt. And I think that there's a lot of it's just little timing things that it felt like Iowa was really close to just making that a total beatdown. It did not, watching it back, it did not feel like it was as close as it was. It felt like Iowa was in control. And I understand the concerns. You want to, with the hype in this offseason, you would have loved to have them come out and drop 56 points. I don't think anybody would have complained with that. But at the same time, I think there were a lot of positives and the room for growth. Now, I think it does kind of maybe leave Iowa with a touch of bad taste in their mouth out of week one, knowing that they still have so much more room to continue to grow.
Absolutely. And with that, we will be with you tomorrow night on Hawk Central Radio, and then we'll catch you post-game from Jack Trice Stadium on Saturday night. Should be a lot of fun. Even the former president coming to the game on Saturday. So the circus begins this week, Tyler. Welcome. This will be your first trip up there. Looking forward to being up there with you and looking forward to covering this for you Hawkeye fans. Thanks for listening to the Hawk Central podcast today. Chad Leistikow, Tyler Tachman saying so long. Talk to you very soon.